Heyo, and welcome to A Wild Subduo Has Appeared. I'm Jonno, and this is my sister, JayBee.
This is obviously a brand new web series, with this being our first attempt. The general idea is going to be us choosing and discussing various underrated games from different consoles. We might also have some secondary videos with a quicker format. We've been playing games since we were little kids. I remember being so excited, and everything that a lot of what we did creatively revolved around our experiences with games. So we became really interested in atmospheres of games, like the overall feeling of a game.
Yeah, and obviously the more we got into playing games, because we started very young, of course, we started to notice exactly what we liked and didn't like in games. And obviously initially you don't know how to explain it, but as you get older, you get it. Yeah, you get exactly why you don't like it. Your ability to explain things gets better, and now we know exactly how to give our reasons for why a game is good or bad.
Graphics and controls are important, but
yes,
there's so many other elements to a game, like obviously the story, but also just the overall feel, and that's what we're really interested in, is the game feel. So we're going to be talking about that a lot. You're going to hear a lot of game feel, because a lot of times that can be the difference for us, at least, between whether a game is a game that you play once, you're like, oh, that's cool, or a game that you come back and you keep playing and you want to experience again. You get that crazy nostalgia love for it when you think about it. But why is it? Like, why do you get that feeling? It's not just because, oh, this game plays good, looks good. It's a solid game. But what is a solid game? Yeah. Like, how can you further explain that?
Yeah. So we're going to kind of take that concept and run with it as we explain the good and the bad of these games. So, alright, let's get started. Today we're going to talk about an old, underrated NES game, StarTropics. Torpedo box.
Let's have some love, show some love for it. Just a little.
Just a little. Just a little love. Dear old Tropics of the Stars. StarTropics was both developed and published by Nintendo for sale only in North America and Europe. It was produced, written, and directed by a man named Genyo Takeda, who also had a hand in working on Punch-Out and developing the Wii. Pretty solid work, I've gotta say. For the sake of absolute transparency here, let me start off by saying that we loved this game and played it as children. So, having said that, removing the nostalgia goggles will still leave you with a unique game that has a lot to offer. This game is pretty friggin' old, as you could probably already guess. If you want to be specific, it came out in 1990 in North America. So when grading the graphical aspect of this game, you have to set your standards back into expectations of the time. It's pretty hard to judge something like this by today's standards. The graphics of StarTropics are a mixed bag. On one hand, the overworld is bright and simplistic, which is shown from a top-down perspective that looks an awful lot like The Legend of Zelda for the NES. Forgive me for impending future references to the original Zelda, which came out in 1986 in Japan and clearly influenced many games of that era, including StarTropics. Anyway, when you aren't walking around through towns looking at small townspeople or pigs with, little details, you're dealing with some cutscenes. Your initial introduction to these cutscenes occurs before you ever get to fight anything, so you see detailed character models in a closer perspective.
Some of the cinematic scenes, if you want to call them that, are actually pretty entertaining, sometimes a little scary, and I get it. Genius. Pure comedy. Finally, we're in a dungeon. And how does it look? Pretty friggin' sweet, actually. First off, your protagonist is clearly visible and you can totally see he's got a dynamite cowlick. His animations are smooth and your weapon has some decent motion blur effects for the time. You've got plenty of weapons, all with their own animations and sprites. We'll get back to weapons later on though. The dungeons are far more detailed than the overworld maps, but they're still quite minimalist. You got your ground, your water, your tiles, your enemies, and yourself. What more do you need? The best aspects of the visuals are definitely the enemies and the bosses, though. I mean, you got your dodo birds, your ostrich with the human skull, 'cause that's a thing. Some bowling balls. Just look at it.
And Mummy's driving cars. It's a Mummy traffic jam.
Nobody uses blinkers anymore. The bosses are the highlight, with 14 in all. All look unique and consist of large, detailed sprites. They're by far the most appealing thing aesthetically in the game. The visuals of StarTropics aren't gonna wow anybody, but they certainly do the job. Interesting enemies, really cool bosses, and a consistent visual theme that captures both the feel of a tropical setting and eventually the mood of space and the idea of technology are all conveyed well enough.
Look at that NES controller. There isn't much to it, right? You got your movement with the D-pad, A is your action button on the overworld, and your jump in dungeons. B is attack, start is pause. Select lets you switch between items while walking around, but you can just pause your game and use the D-pad. Hitting down on the D-pad while paused takes you to a magic items menu, which is incredibly important to the way this game plays. Pausing is quick and navigating your menu simple and intuitive, so overall it feels solid and easy to get the hang of. This game, much like the original Zelda for the NES, also had a save feature with a practically identical layout. However, StarTropics also has a point system, which was different. Unfortunately, the points are essentially pointless. The most important thing to note in terms of translation from control setup to gameplay is the movement of your character. Mike navigates what can only be described as an invisible grid system. Initially, this might seem like a design choice that could hold back your mobility and make the game a very linear experience, but instead they made sure to fully embrace the concept. Enemies, as well as yourself, have to follow the rules of the grid system unless they fly, so generally you're both on even ground. Luckily, while moving around, you are unable to accidentally walk into water or random holes, thanks to this grid system. You've got to jump in on purpose, with your jumping a set distance of 2 tiles. You'll be jumping a lot. Tile jumping montage! Dungeons are lengthy and contain some branching paths with traps and hidden items that take advantage of exploration on a grid system, making every room feel important and worth checking out. By the way, did I mention traps? Yeah, plenty of them in fact. You learn early on that this game can be a little harsh. Well, I don't even care at this point. That brings us to the topic of this game's level of difficulty. I'm gonna be honest and lay it out there. This game can be pretty vicious. Early on, things are simple enough, but of course as the game progresses, there are more traps and dead ends, as well as just an overall large spike in difficulty. At times before you get the hang of things, you'll feel like you're slipping and sliding around while you try to recorrect the direction you're running. Not a big deal as you eventually grasp how to move seamlessly, but some people might initially be turned off by this. This game expects a lot from you, so realize that it won't be all that easy. It is, however, a truly rewarding experience as your skill increases and you can get to a point where you're able to show off a bit. We'll continue that thought a little later, but just know that the game does give you plenty of time to improve your skills in preparation for harder moments ahead.
The story centers around a kid of an unspecified age named Mike. He is set out to visit his uncle Steve, otherwise known as Dr. Jones. Going through the first town you come across, you speak with the village chief and find out that your uncle has been abducted. After agreeing to go after him, you're awarded a yo-yo for a weapon because you're an ace pitcher. Yeah, sounds relevant. Anyway, now you'll be able to speak with the shaman woman who says Dr. Jones was abducted because he found a secret in the lost ruins. Now you enter the dungeon and get things moving. As the story unfolds, your journey becomes more complicated than you're initially led to believe. StarTropics makes a concerted effort to vary your journey with the practice of splitting up the game into 8 chapters, which assist in the overall flow of the story and help the player to better understand the game's changing objectives. You travel through mountains, graveyards, ruins, and even manage to get eaten. I know, sounds like a pretty good Saturday night if you know what I mean.
In terms of old NES games, and remember, we're going back to 1990 here,
The story for StarTropics is incredibly entertaining. We're doing our best not to spoil anything because it's much more fun going into this adventure not knowing how everything plays out and what the point of everything is. Anybody who has played StarTropics knows what we're alluding to. There are some game-changing twists, and with them come new goals that are appropriately conveyed to the player. StarTropics has plenty of humorous moments, but these never distract from the serious story this game has to offer. Each chapter has a side story that you unravel and solve, so to speak, which also helps to move you along in the main portion of the story. All that you accomplish along the way does add some impact to reveals later on, making your journey and the story an overall tremendous triumph for such an old NES game.
Now we've made it to the most important part of our analysis. It's time we touch on exactly what makes StarTropics either a messy experience or a smooth one that teaches you everything you need to know about the game without even realizing it. Lucky for us, there are plenty of fantastic examples. So first off, we're going to give you the rundown on this game and the way it introduces itself to you. The entire first dungeon is simply a learning exercise disguised as a fun game. Just 4 short rooms into the first dungeon, you learn some normal concepts. You kill enemies, doors open. These enemies already have different patterns of movement. You jump on blocks, switches appear. Check, check, and check. It's all easy and relatively safe so far. By the 7th room, you find yourself surrounded by blocks and 2 doors that lead to dead ends. So applying what you've already learned, you search the rest of the blocks and find a hidden switch that blows open a hole up above. So there you go. Now, not only did you realize that there can be fake rooms that lead to nowhere, you also realize that you should probably thoroughly check any new room that you enter. But it's not over. Soon you come across another room where you're unable to avoid hitting a switch that opens up a door to a secret room on the right side.
Ooh, there's a jar jam! Another jam jar! Time for some more jam! What the? There's no jam in here, there's bones! What a goof and a spoof.
Now, you learn that while there are secret rooms with treasure, there also happen to be traps in the dungeons. Basically, don't get too greedy, because you could run into a curveball. Finally, you find yourself in a room with what's clearly a boss. Your first instinct is to just jump up to it and start mashing that B button, but that doesn't work. Then he opens his mouth and you realize that now you can hit him. Either with your yo-yo up close or playing it safe with your sub-weapon from a distance. Now you realize bosses in StarTropics can't just be mashed to death. You've got to find out how to kill them by being observant and handling them in various ways. So here's a quick recap of what we learned from the first dungeon. Kill all enemies and pay attention to their patterns. Explore all tiles and look for switches. There are branching paths that can lead to dead ends or traps with secret items, so be willing to check everything out. And bosses aren't straightforward. They require observation. Paying attention to everything goes a long way in this game, and StarTropics takes that idea to heart. As you play through its long story, it expects you to grow through its gameplay and hone your skills. Aside from the fourth wall-breaking explanation of how to dive with your submarine, everything else is left up to you to understand on your own without any push this to do that. StarTropics treats you like you're smart enough to grasp basic problem solving and grow with these concepts as they evolve, and does a good job of allowing the learning to flow naturally. There are plenty of choices for weapons. Luckily, learning how to use them feels totally organic. Weapons are given right before situations that call for their use in order to either deal with a busy room in a single attack, or to be used against a boss. They're all pretty fun and have unique applications that keep the depth of the gameplay fresh and varied. Your main weapon even manages to get a couple of upgrades through the storyline that improves upon its range and damage. That being said, each one requires that you have a certain amount of health, and when your hearts go below a certain point, you revert back to older forms of your main weapon until you heal up. This serves to empower the player with a sense of growth, but still maintain difficulty by requiring you to play smart and make use of sub-weapons without simply spamming your new and improved yo-yo for the rest of the game.
And that soundtrack, oh my god, just listen to it.
The music of StarTropics is a huge part of what makes this game feel so engaging. The sound effects are also noteworthy. Noises enemies make, as well as what you hear when you build up speed while laying the hurt on a boss, are all satisfying. Lively tracks provide a sense of the tropic locales Mike visits. Moody and foreboding tracks later on successfully provide a feeling of urgency that correspond with the story's more serious moments. Whether you're expected to navigate a maze, solve the infamous piano puzzle that was a nightmare for kids who couldn't read music, or reveal a secret message in a letter included with the game, StarTropics picks your brain constantly in a variety of ways. It does so with flying colors, I might add. All that being said, our verdict for StarTropics is 17 out of 20. The graphics get the job done, making up for some lackluster tile layouts with interesting enemy designs, unique bosses, and detailed cutscenes.
The grid system initially feels a bit clunky, but when mastered is extremely rewarding.
The story is full of humor, a sense of adventure, and plenty of twists. You'll definitely want to follow it through, and with an ending spanning about 8 minutes, it's all the more worth it.
The game feel is where StarTropics excels. The learning feels natural and unforced, the music expresses exactly what it's trying to convey, and there's a wide variety of ways to play the game that all keep the experience fresh and engaging. And that's StarTropics. What are you doing? You know? Go on.
Get on it.
Go and play it. We told you, go play it.
Let's just go somewhere.
Let's go. Let's go, Jane. Let's go. Let's go, Jane.
StarTropics, bro.
Nice. You can get the game for about $6-ish on eBay, or you could fork over about 500 Wii points and get it on the Virtual Console. Either way, it's totally worth your time and your money.
Absolutely.
I recommend it.
Thank you all for watching and keep checking back. There are links at the end of the video and in the description below. We plan to continue adding new content in the very near future. Until then, I'm JayBee.
I'm Jonno, and this is AWSA, signing off.